morning. How is everybody? I was going to read some more Alibaba for the bigs today, but there's some videos online for the littles too. So if you guys think about it and you want to upload and sit down and have a short story, Papa read a couple this weekend that I know you haven't seen yet. So I'm going to read some pages from Baba Berenstein for the bigs, and I'll start where Papa stopped. And then I can't go any longer than 15 minutes. So wherever it is, I'll stop there, and then we'll just keep adding to it. So remember, Alibaba and his mother were they had gone shopping, and so his mother said, well, she wanted to go over to a store where she could look at pocketbooks, purses. So she said, I didn't know there was a sale there. And so they walked back, and Alibaba discovered a store that he hadn't noticed before. Remember, he's on this king and castle thing going on here. So the Donut King store was just across the street from the pocketbook store. Can I go and buy a donut? Begged Alibaba. I'm going to die from hunger. All right, agreed his mother. Here's some money, but don't leave the store, and wait right there, and I'll meet you. Alibaba took the money his mother handed him, and when the light turned green, he crossed the street, eager to eat a donut and to meet another king. Inside the donut shop was a counter with 3 people at it, drinking cups of coffee and eating donuts. Behind the counter, there was no king. Standing there pouring coffee was an elderly woman. Perhaps she was the king's mother, or maybe his wife. Alibaba sat down on one of the empty stools and studied the list of donuts: sugared, honey glazed, chocolate covered, or plain, filled with jelly or cream or custard, round or twisted. They didn't say anything about cinnamon sugar, and that's Nana's favorite. So what do you want? Asked the woman. Well, first I want to meet the king, said Alibaba. Then I'll have a donut. What king? The donut king. I already met the underwear king this morning, and now I want to meet the donut king. You mean Harry? He's the owner. He has the flu, and he won't be coming in today. So what about a donut? Well, what kind of donut do you want? Said the woman. It was a disappointment not to meet the king, but Alibaba found comfort in a chocolate-covered donut. Do you want some milk? Asked the woman. The pin on her stained white jacket read Mildred. Said Alibaba, nodding his head in agreement. Mildred poured him a glass of milk. Tell me about Harry, said Alibaba. Is he like a king at all? Well, he has a gold tooth, Mildred said, laughing. It's right in the front, she said, pointing to one of her own front teeth to demonstrate. So you can't miss it when you're talking to him, but otherwise he's a pretty ordinary guy. Just like everyone else around here. Oh, I wish I could see a real king, said Alibaba. You know, the kind they have in storybooks. What kind? That kind doesn't exist anymore, except in Europe or someplace, said Mildred. Alibaba sighed. Oh, it's too bad. Perhaps his mother was right after all. The door to the shop opened, letting in a gust of cold air, and Mrs. Berenstein. Look at this, she said as she held out a tan leather pocketbook. It was a real bargain. Do you want a donut? Asked Mildred, looking at Mrs. Berenstein and the new pocketbook. No, I just came to pick up my son. He's a real sweet kid, said Mildred. You're doing a good job bringing him up. Why, thanks, said Mrs. Berenstein. Alibaba licked the chocolate off his fingers and got down from the stool. Okay, Mom, he said, I'm done. He paid Mildred for his donut and milk and even remembered to leave her a quarter for a tip. Then they were on their way again. Now will we go and have lunch? Alibaba asked. Lunch? You just had a snack, said his mother, but I'm still hungry. Well, you'll have lunch in a little while, said Mrs. Berenstein, but as long as we're down in this neighborhood, I want to see if I can pick up a sweater for your father. At the Sweater Palace. A palace? Who lived in a palace but a king? Alibaba couldn't wait to enter the store. There were 2 men working behind the store's huge counters. Behind them were shelves and shelves of sweaters in every shade and color imaginable. Mrs. Bernstein began speaking with one of the men, and Alibaba could see that this was going to take a long time. However, being in a palace, he was determined to locate the king. He walked over to the unoccupied salesman and addressed him. Are you the king of the Sweater Palace? He asked. My brother and I are co-owners, said the man, smiling. Does that make me a king? Which of you is the oldest? The oldest son always inherits the kingdom and the throne, said Alibaba, remembering the fairy tales he just read when he was younger. Well, it just so happens that we're twins, said the salesman. I'm Fred, and that's my brother Ed over there. Our parents were so excited when we were born that they couldn't even remember which one of us was born first. No kidding, said Alibaba. He turned to look at the other twin who was speaking to Mrs. Berenstein. He was showing her the various types of sweaters that he had in stock, and the two men did look an awful lot alike. They matched like two sleeves on the same sweater. I noticed a lot of kings in the neighborhood, said Ali Baba. There was the underwear king named Barney, an egg roll king, and a donut king who has the flu. Fred nodded his hand. Any man can be a king, he agreed. It's just no big deal. Around here, you can call yourself a king, too, if you wanted to. Well, I'd like that, said Ali Baba. I could be king of the Davids. In the Bible, there was King David. I would be king of all the Davids. Fine, if that's what you want, said Fred. Wouldn't it be great to be a real king over everyone else, said Ali Baba, to be in charge of the whole world? Fred shrugged his shoulders. Some kings were good and some were bad. But the worst thing about kings was that they had their jobs for life, and you couldn't vote them out of office like we can vote out the president or the governor or the mayor. And another thing, their sons automatically became the next kings, even if they were stupid or wicked. I hadn't thought of that, said Ali Baba. Listen, kid, I can't talk anymore. I just remembered something, said Fred. He called over to his brother. Ed, I'm going off to vote. I'll be back in 10 or 15 minutes. Ed looked from the pile of sweaters he'd set out on the counter, and he nodded to his brother. Ali Baba marveled that they did look very, very, very much alike. He walked over to his mother's. The sweaters all looked pretty much alike to him, too. He wondered how she'd ever be able to make a decision. But eventually, just as Ali Baba thought he would collapse from exhaustion, she made her choice. Ed rang up the sale and put the sweater in the box. So long, Ed, said Ali Baba as they walked toward the door. How do you know my name? Ed asked. I know a lot of things, said Ali Baba. Now we'll stop for lunch, said Mrs. Berenstein when they were out in the cold November air. Look, she said, we can eat there if you want. And the sign said, Burger King. Ali Baba shook his head. No, he said, couldn't we have Chinese food, please? So the two of them crossed the street, and on the next block they found China Castle. It was a perfect place for lunch, even though it wasn't a real castle, and Ali Baba wasn't a real king. Chapter 4. Ali Baba meets Santa Claus. In the first place, Ali Baba Berenstein was 9 years, 6 months, and 23 days old. Much too old to believe in the existence of Santa Claus. In the second place, Ali Baba was Jewish. That meant that he and his parents didn't celebrate Christmas. Still, he knew all about Santa Claus from storybooks and television shows and from the tales his classmates told him. Nevertheless, it was still a major surprise to get off the bus on his way home from school and to see Santa Claus walking toward him. Ali Baba was not alone. Natalie Gomez, the second grader who lived on his street, got off the bus at the same stop and stood beside him. Look over there, said Ali Baba, pointing toward the short, heavy-set man with a thick white head of white hair and a long flowing white beard. He sure looks like Santa Claus, doesn't he? Natalie's jaw dropped open. For a moment, she didn't say a word to Ali Baba. Even though he was wearing dark slacks and a tweed overcoat, she also recognized that man. It is Santa Claus, she whispered. I know it's him. I would recognize him anywhere. Her voice was full of awe. After all, it wasn't every day you met Santa Claus walking down Broadway. He lives at the North Pole. Natalie reminded Ali Baba. That's a lot of bus and subway stops away from here. It's halfway around the world, Ali Baba informed her. I wonder why he isn't wearing his red suit, Natalie asked as the man came toward them. Use your head, Ali Baba told the little girl. If he wore his bright red suit with the white fur trim, everyone would be chasing after him. That's a disguise that he has on now. Let's follow him, said Ali Baba as the man approached still closer. We can't do that, Natalie said. Why not, said Ali Baba. Don't you want to see where he's going? Natalie shook her head. But he might get angry. Then he won't bring us anything for Christmas. Well, I don't have to worry about that. See, he might, I don't have to worry about that. All I want to see is where he goes. Maybe he's inspecting the toy shops around here or something. So he turned to follow the bearded man, but he did not have to go far at all. Look, said Natalie as Santa Claus entered a barber shop. He's going for a haircut. Ali Baba and Natalie stood outside the shop and peeked through the window. They watched as the famous man got into one of the chairs. The barber put a towel around his neck and began snipping at his hair. They watched as the barber trimmed Santa Claus's beard. You think the barber knows who he is? Asked Natalie. Nope, said Ali Baba with certainly. Grown-ups don't believe in Santa Claus. You believe in him, don't you, said Natalie. Just because you're 2 years older than me doesn't mean you can't believe in him. It's different with me, Alibaba reminded Natalie. Don't forget that I don't celebrate Christmas. You mean you don't get any presents at all? Asked Natalie, shocked. Sure, I get presents. I get birthday presents and Hanukkah presents and presents from my grandparents just because they love me. Even if there isn't a holiday, sometimes my father brings something home for me because he saw it in a store and thought I would like it and didn't want to wait till it was my birthday. And last week, my mother bought me a new book that she saw on sale in the bookstore because she knew I'd read other books by the same writer. I get loads of presents. I'm going to stop right here and tell you guys a little story about what happened to me this morning. I got up this morning all night long. Something was going bang, bang, bang against the house. It's cold outside. It's below zero, and the wind has been really strong. It's blowing really hard. And so I figured out that I was going to get all dressed up like an Eskimo, and I'm going to get out there and try and get around in the back of the house to see what it was. Now, we have snowbanks higher than Nana. So what I had to do was put my hat and my coat and my scarf and my mittens and my boots on and walk all the way down to Jack's house. Do you remember Jack that lived next door to us? You guys have all seen Jack or met Jack. I had to walk down Jack's driveway, climb over a snowbank, and go around to the back side of the house because there's so much snow by the deck I can't get by there anymore. And sure enough, I found that the door was open to the crawl space. Do you remember Eli and Thad going underneath the crawl space and playing? You remember that? So I had to figure out a way to get it to shut and stay shut because it's swollen and I couldn't latch it anymore. So I walked over through big snowbanks taller than me and got a garbage can that we're not using. And I went back and I banged on the door to try and get it to close. And I piled the garbage can in front of it. And it stayed shut. And then I had to climb over the snowbanks and down Jack's driveway and down our road and back up our driveway and into the house. And by then I was frozen. And I probably wasn't outside more than 10 or 15 minutes. But when the wind chill is below zero, it can freeze you. And it was very cold. So anyway, Nana and Papa love you guys. We pray for you every day. I hope everything's going well in Albania. And that you guys are enjoying school with Miss Allison. And I hope everything's going well in Arkansas. And you guys are doing your schoolwork and you're being good boys for your mom and dad. We love you all so much and we pray for you every day. I'm going to let this go and I'll talk to you soon. And I'll finish Alibaba Meets Santa Claus. Bye, guys.